What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale. Wow, I can't pronounce my own name. Coming at you with another 2023-2024 NBA look ahead. We're on to the Brooklyn Nets. I am joined by Lucas Kaplan, first-time guest. Doesn't know what he's getting into just yet. Follow him on Twitter at Lucas Kaplan. That's at LUCASKAPLAN_. That's important. It's on the screen if you're watching. It will be in the YouTube and podcast description as well. He covers the Nets for Nets Daily, writes great stuff about them. Also, I would recommend his film stuff that just pops up in my Twitter feed all the time. And then he's also covering the Liberty. Lucas, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's speaking of the Nets and Liberty, it's a busy time. You know, my worlds are colliding, as some might say. So the fall is basketball season, and I'd say it's all going pretty well.
Well, one, thank you so much for agreeing to join us. Two, this team is this is number 20. I don't know. I think it's like 26 or whatever, 23, whatever it is with these look aheads. This team I just have no feel for. I'm not going to lie. I have very little feel for what, if they're left as currently constructed, what they're going to be. So I wanted to start though, by asking you, now that we're out of the KD, Kevin Durant, KD, Kyrie era, and not just the era, but the whole trade demand stuff that they went through, how big of a deal is that for the organization to finally be okay, we don't necessarily, doesn't seem like they've charted a perma direction at the moment, but it's that pale is no longer being cast over the organization. We can move on and now figure out what we're doing.
Yeah, I think for one, if you want to be an optimist, there are less decision makers in the room. We're kind of back to the Nets of almost a decade ago, but after the OG Brooklyn super team with the old Celtic stars. So we're back to Sean Marks, really is the lead voice decision maker, some input from ownership. So I think that is, a bit of clarity that maybe eases the franchise a little bit. But other than that, I like what you said. They haven't picked a perma direction. They are still in a little bit of limbo. They are in a waiting game. And you hear the best interview on the team, Spencer Dinwiddie. He talked about it as an exit interview, and he talked about it at Media Day this year. He's like, listen, we're not a championship team. We can win a few games, and there's a lot of directions that this franchise can go. And he pretty much summed it up.
And so what do you kind of think about looking at the offseason? And they had very little flexibility to begin with. You bring back Cam Johnson, take all these flyers. How did you feel about that direction they went in, kind of deciding that, well, we're going to keep this optionality, we're not going to do anything major? Do you think that was the right call?
Yeah, I honestly did. I mean, at first I thought maybe if Scoot for Mikal was somehow on the table, they should have pursued that a little bit strongly, and I was vocal about that. But it's not like they handcuffed themselves to mediocrity for a long time. If we're expecting them to be mediocre this year, that is just this year. Ben Simmons becomes an expiring contract after this year. He's a free agent in the summer of 25. Mikal, very team-friendly deal. I would argue Cam Johnson's deal is not that much of an albatross at all, really. So, yeah, they're settling into sort of, I guess, where everyone says you don't want to be in the NBA, in purgatory. But I don't view them as handcuffed to that. And to be honest, I understand it. They don't have their own draft pick this year that's going out to Houston. The draft haul they got for the two stars is really in 2027, where they have picks from the Suns and the Sixers, and 2029, where they have picks from the Suns and the Mavericks. So it's a little bit too early, I think, to think of tangible, specific, maybe destinations for those picks if they were trying to get players back.
I will say, it's not funny. I just found it interesting that I think Damian Lillard is so in love with Mikal Bridges that the Nets made his final list of 3, because even if you were just to put him on this team and you didn't give up Nic Claxton or Mikal Bridges, they're not a championship contender with Damian Lillard, and we're believed that he wants to win. Mikal Bridges just must be one of the best teammates of all time.
He must. I mean, hey, and people and the organization and his teammates, people really seem to like him. So I guess you can't just dismiss that. Clearly, Dame didn't.
So last year's team, I mean, let's just start with Mikal Bridges. He had shown, I think, not that people overblew it, but he had shown that the turn was kind of coming in Phoenix because of injuries and pecking order issues there. He goes to the Nets and he played like an all-NBA player once he was on, but that was the difference. It went from, oh, could this be an all-star to, oh, is this an all-NBA player? Starting with this, what most impressed you or maybe even surprised you about his stint in Brooklyn so far?
I think what most impressed me is that they, just by way of roster construction, needed to ask so much of him in the way of primary ball handling, and it wasn't always perfect. The playmaking could improve. You know, his shot diet is very tough when he's creating for himself, and there are a lot of quips you could have with him. But I mean, you get traded to a team in the middle of the season, no training camp, and all of a sudden you're, if not the primary ball handler, at least a strong number two next to Dinwiddie. And yeah, offensive rating aside, assist, turnover, whatever, he's averaging 27 on close to 50, 40, 90. I think I underestimated just how easily he can pull up from the mid range and that high release point and just get looks off. And sometimes, it can lead to rough shooting nights, but a lot of the times, like he scored a lot of 30 burgers. So I was just impressed by the consistency, really, in how he can get to his spots and get shots off.
I think you did mention the part of his game that everyone nationally at least will be monitoring, which is his passing. Is that the area of development you're most interested in, or is there something else that you're focused on watching this team very up close?
Honestly, I'm going to go the other way and say that I don't, as good of a mid range shooter as he is, Nets fans were accustomed to KD, Kyrie as maybe two of the best. KD in particular was like,
Yeah.
I don't even know, 57% from mid range last year, just like unfathomable. Mikhail's going to need to either get to the rim on some of these drives, but more likely than that, given the Nets spacing and, given that he's been a primary ball handler for like 20 games, I'm really looking to see if he jacks up the pull up three percentage this year. Like he has that high release point, he can get to it pretty easily. I think that as a, small, super nerdy thing is going to be what I'm looking for as maybe the first step in the evolution. Because I could see him getting a like 7, 8 pull up threes a game. I mean, that shot is really hard to contest.
That is not one I had thought of, but it's a great point. Like to come up with that volume, and if you're going to be a number one option on offense, that's like the it skill right now. But I agree that like we know he can get to the rim when he's off ball or in transition, but like the
Mm-hmm.
on ball pressure in the half court would be big. I was impressed though, because like you mentioned how tough his looks are sometimes when he's creating for himself, and maybe he's fading or bailing out on drives, but like he still got to the line a ton during his time in Brooklyn relative to what he was doing in Phoenix. And so if he's able to get to the basket more, in theory, like even there might be room for that free throw volume to grow, which would also be big for this
Mm-hmm.
offense, I would think.
Oh, definitely. They don't get to the line a ton. I mean, we'll see. I'm sure we'll talk about Simmons and Claxton and all that stuff. The worry I have there with Mikal is like everyone's going to have to navigate now. They're going to play Ben, they're going to play him next to Claxton. That's going to be a spacing challenge for everyone to figure out. So if Mikal's free throw rate dips a little bit, I wouldn't be too alarmed just because he's figuring out playing with two guys that are truly non spacers.
The other thing that I think is big for him is I think that they have enough to like go to different people on defense to where he doesn't have to shoulder necessarily the same burden that he did in Phoenix. But if you have to be your team's best defensive player and their best offensive player, that's just exhausting. And so like I would just be worried, okay, well, like what does this guy's an Iron Man? Like he's the most Mikal Bridges stat of all time will be when he plays in 83 out of 82 games because the Nets win like the in-season tournament or something. So I'd be worried about like that wearing down. But if Simmons stays healthy, the fact that Nic Claxton is so versatile and you do have Dorian Finney-Smith there right now, even Royce O'Neal at the moment is like low key kind of huge. I think to have that optionality so that you can move him around a little bit on defense.
I think so. And one of the, I think, underreported, not to pile on him or anything, but the defense certainly slipped after he got to Brooklyn. I mean, he wasn't quite the same level of defense. And I think you saw that reflected in a lack of all defense voting for him.
Mhm.
And just to put a button on that, he did play 83 games last year because he got traded to the Nets
Oh,
when they
that's
were one behind schedule. So it's already happened to
I
prove
had a
your point.
viral tweet off that. I can't believe I've already forgot about that's how much going viral matters, folks, is
Yes,
I've already forgotten that.
exactly.
What I also found interesting about this team was they did not play particularly fast relative to what I thought their personnel was after the trade. Are we going to see that change this season?
Absolutely. And I when you said that, just to put a bow on it, Mikhail said at media day this year, I definitely wasn't playing how I wanted to play on the other end defensively when I got here. Yeah, the offensive load, but there's always the concentration piece. So he's aware of it, which I thought was an interesting kind of shows you why everybody likes Mikal,
Yeah,
in a
he is
sense.
one of my favorite players in the. He's just so
Yeah.
likable, and I'm happy he's still with Cam Johnson because kind of busting
Hmm.
up like the young Suns was. I don't really have any allegiances, but like it kind of just hurt. But the fact that he's still
Right.
with Cam makes me feel a little bit better.
Right. And I think that's very understandable. And they've talked about how happy they are to be together. But in terms of the transition thing, I think they switched a lot last year. And Jacques Vaughn talked about in training camp this year. We were all new. That was a bailout in a lot of ways. Like I didn't have time to put in all these concepts. We resorted to switching.
Mhm.
And that killed them on the defensive glass more than anything. And I think because they couldn't rebound, they couldn't really get out in transition. That's where it started. And then I think this year, look who they signed and got rid of. No more Joe Harris, Patty Mills, Seth Curry in the rotation. It's Lonnie Walker, Dennis Smith Jr. Maybe we see a trend in Watford, stuff like that. I mean, not the shooting has fallen off a little bit, but these guys are athletic and they're fast and they want to get out and run. And you're adding healthier Ben Simmons. And they're playing more drop coverage, as Vaughn has talked about, trying to fix the defensive rebounding issues. So, yes, I can almost guarantee, and there's not many things you can guarantee, the pace will be up this year, provided they can rebound at least like an acceptable level.
So, and do you think that they're going to be able to install these like different guiding principles then on defense when you look because they're still kind of small, and so even if you're not switching as much, are they going to be able to rebound at effect? I think they were 28th, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
defensive rebounding rate after the Mikal Bridges trades. Like, are they even built to like Ben Simmons? I mean, we haven't talked about him yet, and we will. Just feels super critical to that as well. Like if you want to up your rebounding and get out in transition.
Yeah, I don't think they'll go away fully from switching. I mean, they really haven't played consistent drop coverage since DeAndre Jordan was getting consistent minutes in Brooklyn. So
Oh
that's how
wow,
long it's
that
been,
feels like 8 seasons ago. So
at
there's been too
least.
many iterations of this team
At least. So yeah, they got to put it in. They got to work on it. And if you've seen any of the preseason stuff so far, it's been rough. Um,
on the
Obviously,
perimeter. Yeah, it's been
yeah,
weird.
the guys. I'm gonna be an optimist and say guys are given preseason effort in terms of navigating screens, but it's gonna be a work in progress all year. So I think they'll mix it up. I don't think they'll go fully away from switching. I think the guiding principle of this team will still be length and versatility. The roster simply isn't built any other way. I mean, it'd be silly to compile all of these long athletes that are skinny. As you said,
Mhm.
they're small. It'd be silly not to try to, make that a strength in some way.
The Ben Simmons hype train is at full bore at the moment. Um, what are your just impressions of him so far during the preseason, both physically and functionally? And if you need to take anything away from those empty gym videos that he's posting.
Yeah, I mean, I watched every minute last year. I and probably rewatched most of them as well. Like I get the skepticism. I get that it's year 27 of Ben Simmons offseason hype, but like there is an objective. He wasn't moving like this last year. Like he's moving differently. Even on like some defensive rebounds last night against Maccabi. His head is near the rim when he's going up. He just looks springier. He's willing to like lean into guys when he's trying to go finish. And I don't want to, start the parade on Flatbush Avenue because of it, but I didn't see it last year. Nobody saw it last year. And it matches up with what we've been hearing. And I understand that, they're not going to come out and say, Ben Simmons doesn't look good. But when you take all the evidence that we've been given, and now there's evidence on film, he's going to be a little bit better this season. He's going to be not the worst athlete in the league. It's going to get back to at least an acceptable level for him, and that could be. I'm pretty convinced. If that's the standard for getting on the hype train, I already have my ticket.
So, what do you think he needs to do most, or that you'll be watching most closely to optimize or elevate this team on offense? I saw you had tweeted the other day that he's been more aggressive from the 45 cut area. Is it that? Is it like just the off ball movement so that you can move him off the ball
Yeah,
type thing, or is it something else?
there's the way I've described in the preseason is like he could make such a difference for this team just because the things that he's even okay at are really what they need. They need a defender who is a little bit bigger. They need someone to rebound and push. They need a little bit of connective ball handling energy because Dinwiddie's the only real point guard on the roster right now. I guess Dennis Smith Jr. But the biggest thing is just going to be not being afraid to take the ball at the rim one-on-one. Because if he can collapse the defense a little bit and provide some sort of paint pressure, he might be the only net doing that this year. So they really do need that. But as you said, there's a ton of different facets to his game, like the off-ball moving and, attacking from the 45. If there's a high pick and roll, that will have, cascading positive effects.
I'm also wondering if you can get him moving off the ball, if it gives him more confidence with his on-ball drives, because when you just go over year by year and just like the percentage of drives of his, the drives were just plummeting like per minute. I know his playing time was down. And then just like the percentage of drives that were ending in a shot, opportunity, or free throw, they've also just plunged. And that just like, you can't have like someone be that level of a non-threat when he in theory is so integral to how you want to run your offense, or I should say maximizing your offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I didn't obviously watch as much film on him in Philly as I do now. Like, I'm curious, why do you think that decline started, I guess? Because it definitely started before that Hawks series, that infamous Hawks series. And then that was seen as like, the culmination of this kind of decline, as I said. So I guess, do you have any, I don't know. It's been one of the more confusing stories for a while now.
I think like, and I don't know if this is accurate, but I think the idea was like must have been shit going on with his back beforehand, maybe. But I also don't. One of the big things, and you would know this, is just like the jokes, the pressure, the memes about what he was on offense. Like they already existed, not to the degree that they do now.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm wondering if that took a toll on him mentally, where every year was the questions about like, well, are you going to throw up these floaters, or are you going to take a mid-range jumper? Are you going to hit, or is this the year you start shooting threes? And I'm wondering if that got to him. But then it was also, and I don't know if it was the same season of that Hawks series, but he started out the season where he was like taking these sweeping hook shots and posting up and looked like he just felt so comfortable. It wasn't necessarily super aggressive, but had, I'll say, more levels to his scoring than when he's like, he was a zero level scorer by the time that he was in, like by the end of his time in Philly. And so I honestly I feel like it was a combination of something mentally, but also just there had to be some physical issues that, I mean, we know he was injured coming into the league, but the physical issues had to, I do believe were not the word dire. They were more extensive before they started becoming public would be my guess.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I mean, that's the big thing from last year to this year. His back it's just clearly the way he moves around on the court, so much springier. And I think there may be a point this year where people bring up the shot percentages as in the volume from different area of the court. Because if you look at them just on, Basketball Reference or whatever, he was taking shots at the rim. He was taking shots from the 3 to 10 foot range last year. But all of these drives were, okay, let me back in a little bit and let me not go full speed and let me kind of like awkwardly swivel into this hook shot. I mean, yesterday against Maccabi, like he's taking it to the rim at somebody and getting his hand on the backboard. It's not like this weird hook shot that may get categorized as a rim attempt. And even, that preseason game against Lakers where he's taking it at LeBron, he's going full throttle. That's what's really encouraging to me. That's what gives me hope. I didn't see it last year at all. And I don't, hype train year 27 notwithstanding, it's nice to see some sort of tangible progress.
I just always get worried. There's no sign. Maybe there is scientific data behind this, but like just big dudes and back problems. I'm just like perennially scared. And to that end, is there, and I know I didn't include this in the outline, is there any plan to like, how many minutes can he play right off the bat? Or are there going to be any limitations or monitoring there?
There's going to be. Jacques Vaughn talked about it last night after the game. He talked about it's just going to be constant communication because there was a stretch last year in November. There was a 6-game stretch where he averaged 16, 6, and 6. And then he played the second night of a back-to-back against Orlando, and he hurt his knee, which later came out was we think it's related to the back soreness, these knee problems that he was been having. And he missed 2 weeks, and then he came back in December, and it was just like he was never the same all year. And that's where the decline was really obvious. And he and Vaughn have talked about this kind of schism that they had last year. Like Vaughn was asking a lot of him, and Ben didn't feel he could do it, but he wasn't being specific as to why. And in training camp this year, Ben has said, our relationship is much better. I proved to him that I really was hurt and I'm really working hard now. And Vaughn has pretty much said the same exact thing. So there's definitely some sort of plan. There's definitely some, as Vaughn said, constant communication in the works, but I think we'll have to see the specifics when they, play out.
This is more topical than big picture, but what is the state of the Cam Johnson hamstring injury?
He we haven't gotten any updates on it. He pretty much said he was trying to play at some point in the preseason, so I'm gonna assume that means Wednesday, their fourth and final preseason game in Miami. If he doesn't, then I would raise my eyebrows. But if he does, then we appear to be all on schedule.
You'd already said too that the number on his contract is fine. 4 years guaranteed at 90. I think everyone, and myself included, just needs to do a better job of like, yeah, there's sticker shock, but the percentage of the salary cap for him is just, and it's declining. And so like by the end of his deal right now, he's projected to be making 13.8% of the salary cap. It is like for a rotation player, that's fine. Were you surprised though that no other teams got involved? And even follow up, I just found this funny. I don't think they did anything wrong personally. I know people trolled them. The fact that the Detroit Pistons were the team most heavily linked to them, and then they actively helped the Nets like salary dump Joe Harris that used up their cap space so they could not make a Cam Johnson pursuit.
Yeah, I'm not gonna pretend that I have any inside information, but it's definitely a little bit of an eyebrow raiser, maybe a little bit of washing each other's hands, one hand washing the other there. And hey, I mean, I've heard that they like Joe Harris so far in Detroit. So, maybe it'll work out for both sides.
Man, if he could stay healthy, they could use his shooting for what it's worth. But
that is true. I mean, he does. Everyone could use a guy that shoots like, I think he's like the fourth or fifth most accurate 3-point shooter in NBA history. I wasn't too surprised about Cam just based on the salary cap hasn't increased yet. So you are committing some amount of money to a guy that realistically, let's say title contenders are going after him. He's not going to be anything more than your fourth or fifth best player. And you're probably paying him like your second or third, perhaps. And if you do have 2 or 3 max contracts, then you can't afford to give him $23 million a year as the Nets did. So that part didn't surprise me too much. And we also heard all spring, like, yeah, I want to be in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn was like, yeah, we want Cam. So that didn't surprise me. I think if the one thing that I would be, I guess, a little bit worried about Cam is he is an older player. I think he's 27, 28. And if he's not going to add a lot of offensive juice to this team, he's going to be a really expensive stand in the corner and shoot guy.
And is that something, I guess, we didn't see a ton of it in Brooklyn, but like he did bust out like some good off the dribble moments in Phoenix. So is that something just based off what you've seen of him? One, do you believe that that's like an area in which you can develop? And two, will the opportunity even be there when you're looking at kind of the hierarchy of the Nets offense with Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges, and then Ben Simmons needing the ball specifically?
I think it'll be there. I think with Ben, it's like he's going to have the ball, but he's also going to get a lot of guys going downhill with handoffs and stuff like that. And I really see Ben and Cam kind of being linked to each other in a lot of their minutes this year because Cam just needs that extra push downhill. And once you get him going downhill, he was the only net that wasn't deathly afraid of attacking Embiid in that Sixers series last year. And he actually had some nice finishes, and that really impressed me. But I could see Cam running a lot of, Chicago actions coming off a handoff and a screen. I don't think he's going to initiate from a standstill, but there is room for him and there's definitely opportunities for him on the ball this year. How well those go, I'm not going to say I'm pessimistic or optimistic. I don't know if I have a great feel for it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, they could just in theory because he is relative to this team specifically. If he could give them like more, if you're going to have him play, let's say the 4, if he's someone who can give them like better positional rebounding, that would also go a long way for them. And in theory, he should have the size, but he's just never been that guy. And yet the way that they could probably move him around defensively because they have so many of these, long rangey defenders, maybe he will be in better position this season to like juice up the rebounding rate, which I think, again, we've talked about rebounding for this team a few times already. That would go a long way.
Yeah, it really would. I don't think he's ever averaged 5 rebounds in a season. I think his career high is actually closer to like the low fours. But as long as he's, accountable, boxing out, stuff like that, he's 6'8", he's a big dude. He could definitely help with the rebounding. He also only shot 36.5, 37% from three after the deadline. And he had a lot of like 1 of 8, 2 of 7 games on a lot of good looks for Brooklyn last year. So I think just right off the bat, if he's closer to his normal self from three, just that will make a big difference for the Nets too.
Yeah, that's huge as well. You're new to the podcast, so you might not know, but I'm obsessed with Nic Claxton. Just one of my faves. The defense, like we know about the defense, he's like maybe the most versatile center, and he's one of the 3 most versatile defensive centers in the game. Offensively, there was like a real leap there. And I know the percentages kind of like dipped a little bit later in the year, but just the open space drives or faking the dribble, like faking the handoffs into drives, that was a huge development. Is there like, does he have one, what impressed you most about his development last year? And 2, are there other levels that he can still add to what he's done?
So first of all, he led the league in field goal percentage, in field goal percentage last year.
And this isn't like DeAndre, like he was taking hook shots. Again, we just mentioned he's going after drives.
It's so nice to talk to a fellow Nic Claxton appreciator because you see it. Like, it wasn't just like Clint Capella Houston leading the league in field goal percentage. Like, I'm catching a dunk every single time. Like, there was a lot of 1 dribble, 2 dribble drives, like righty finishes, high off the glass, hook shots. Believe me, if you ever wanted to look through all the clips that I have downloaded, I have 10 minutes of otherwise maybe uninspiring, hook shots and spin moves against Brook Lopez. But to me and you, to guys like us, it's like a pot of gold. So thank you for letting me go on that little rant.
And fun aside, my rant to your rant would be when I clipped something in the middle of last year because I was just like, I'd watched successive games and like what he was doing. I was like, what the hell is going on? So I posted videos of what I had noticed, and there were people that responded saying, I thought this was Kevin Durant on the ball when I was watching. And I'm like, man, I mean, he's not quite that, but it was just like, it was so just the growth on offense, like even just the expansion functions, forget the efficiency, but the expansion was just so stark.
Well, if you recall his draft kind of, his status as a draft prospect, he pretty much ran point guard for like.
I did not know that.
He pretty much was a big guard for an awful Georgia team that won like 3 games in SEC play. And he was really like a big wing and a switch guy, and he pushed the ball in transition, and he didn't average a ton of blocks. And he fell to the second round because I think a lot of teams were like, what do we do with this, really? And he took a good amount of threes too. And I think if you would ever want to get into the draft weeds, it was like teams too worried about role and fit versus like, holy shit, look at this 6'11", uber talented, crazy athlete, super coordinated, like plug and play guy, which he became. So the offense, it's a contract year, a fact not lost on anybody with the Nets. And I really hope, because the offense may struggle in the half court, I hope they just turn him loose on some more hub actions. Like, hey, fake dribble handoff. You can get from the 3-point line to the rim in 1 dribble and finish with either hand. There was a game against the Kings last year where he was switched on Terrence Davis 2 possessions in a row. This is the stuff I'll never forget. Like, and they post him up on Terrence Davis, end 1, post up, like spin move, lefty hook. Next possession, I think he gets fouled again, but has to shoot 2 free throws. And then they didn't do it for like 3 weeks after that. So trust me, I want to see it just as badly as you do, but it was wildly impressive last year.
Do you have any, just because we haven't seen a ton of it, like, can he play with Ben Simmons?
I don't know. We have seen a little of it, but if he's playing with the Ben Simmons that he played with last year, that's just a Ben Simmons problem. You know what I mean? It's like Ben Simmons needs to be Ben Simmons for that to work. And honestly, We'll see. I mean, it's going to be a season-long work in progress. Like, they're talking about it in preseason, and we're 3 weeks in, and I already feel bad asking Jacques Vaughn more questions because it's like, what else is there to say? It's tough to space with two absolute non-three-point threats. Like, they're going to be working on it in December. So we'll see. I mean, ideally, the defense and transition outweighs any potential half-court spacing issues. That's the
Right.
hope, I think.
And if you're going to put 3 shooters around them at all times in those lineups, which I assume I don't know why you wouldn't.
Right. Right.
It should make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
My non-serious question is: are you buying the Cam Thomas as a two-way force hype? And my serious question is: what kind of opportunity you expect him to have, and what does he actually need to do to ensure that he has at least a somewhat regular role in this rotation?
I'll answer both of those in one fell swoop. No, and no, he's not going to be a two-way force, but he needs to not be a destructive defender. And I don't want to pile on. I don't want to sound like I'm anti-Cam Thomas because Nets Twitter will make me walk the plank. But he just needs to not lose his man off the ball. I don't really have any concerns on the ball, but there are too many times where he kind of spaces out. And on a team last year that was built on switching and communication because they couldn't do anything else, that I think more than anything kept him off the court. So he at least needs to be passable on that end. And then elsewhere, he's such a talented offensive scorer, but it feels like he only gets in the flow state when he's attacking the basket. Like there are times where he'll catch a ball like a swing pass and there's an advantage to exploit and he holds it and the advantage dies and the decision making is a little slow. And it's like just shooting it would be better. Just shooting a catch and shoot three would be better. So the Nets need what Cam can do. And I think that's where the frustration from the fans comes from. But Cam sort of just can't lose advantages on offense and he can't provide advantages on defense. He just needs to be neutral when he's not putting the ball in the hole. And that's not a diss. I mean, that's hard. It's hard for a second year player who's at 6'3" to do that. Like that's not an easy thing they're asking of him, but it is what he needs to do.
And it's also it gets just crowded because you could try it, but like he's not a wing. And so, and it gets all of a sudden crowded where you have Spencer Dinwiddie. I mean, Ben Simmons can do whatever, but you have Dennis Smith Jr. You sign Lonnie Walker the fourth. And that would be, that's actually an accidental segue into this next question. Which of the non-rookie additions to this team are you most intrigued by, or do you see playing the biggest role or just being most important? And if they're separate, you're intrigued by X, but you think they're going to lean on Y. That's obviously good too.
I'm intrigued by Dennis. Just if they're going to run more drop, the screen navigation, pushing, but that feels like me thinking with my heart instead of my brain. And I just see Lonnie. I see Lonnie being this athletic wing type that can maybe do some more on-ball stuff. Such a better shooter than Dennis Smith to a point where I don't think the Nets can I think they just have to accept that reality and Lonnie gets more minutes. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
if Lonnie's getting more minutes, it's where's Cam Thomas fitting into this rotation if Lonnie's playing a real role?
Yeah, I will say Cam has come back to camp with a jump shot that is a little bit more centered. His elbow's a little bit more straight. And to me, that screams like we need you to take catch and shoot 3-point attempts. And he's done that a little bit in preseason. But yeah, there will be injuries. Cam will get his moments. I think Lonnie's pretty much guaranteed to get his. I'm worried about Dennis, like if the spacing just becomes untenable, where you already can't play him next to Claxton and Ben, so he needs to come in probably bench lineups where Ben is on the bench. So it's because he can throw those pocket passes to rollers. So it's Dennis, Claxton, 3 shooters. But even then, like the offense is going to be great, and if they become hampered by his non-shooting and the drop defense isn't great, I'm intrigued by Dennis. I could see this kind of going poorly.
Have you any general impressions of the Harry Giles? Like, is there a chance he would make the roster? Do you think they'll end up two-weighing him?
I think he's going to make the roster. I think that they've kind of been open about Harry Giles, Trendon, Watford, Darius, Bazley are all competing for one spot, maybe 2, because they can slap a two-way on Giles. the Harry Giles the third provision in the new CBA this offseason. But he's the biggest, he's the best rebounder of those three, and that's something the front office has really nailed home. He has some nice touch around the rim, and honestly, he's looked good. He's looked spry. And as much as I love Trendon Watford, and a lot of nerd Twitter loves Trendon Watford too, I think it's easy to see a role for Giles. Should Sharpe get into foul trouble, get hurt as the backup center? Should they need a guy who can catch a pocket pass and maybe like make a floater from 8 feet? So I think Giles is not a lock to make the roster, but I would honestly be really surprised if he doesn't at least get a two-way. Everybody's also been, raving about him in the locker room, stuff like that too.
What did you make of Sharpe's development this year, and how big of a role do you expect him to play this season?
Well, I think this one is honestly kind of an easy answer, just because, what do you think of their backup center rotation when you look?
It's just like, yeah, it's like it has to be him. I'm just wondering, like, I don't know. I'm always left wanting more from him on the defensive end specifically. Like, he showed some like nice touch at points offensively last year. I mean, you watch him way more than I did, obviously. I just don't know what. It's not that I don't understand the theory of him just yet. I don't know what to make of him just yet, is more like it.
He had this one play against the Sixers where he ended up on a switch, and he was guarding the wing on the left side, on the right side of the court. And then I think Joel Embiid kind of had a drive from the top of the key, but going to his left hand. And Sharpe like came across the court and blocked it off the glass. And I was like, oh my God, like, I've never seen him act like this before. But that is, I think, the Sharpe. It's so intriguing at times, but he's a big dude and they really want him to rebound. And then it's like, okay, he can do that, but also his technique and drop has not been great in his career. And he's working on it, and it's improved a little, but it's not great. And like, can he, are you really going to deploy him like as a switch big? Because then you're not addressing really the rebounding stuff at all, which is another big part of the Sharpe theory. So it feels like he has skills, but it's like, I wish you could, like on 2K, transfer some of the attribute points to other areas where it would just give him like, a really solid, sensible role. Because it's not that he can't play, it's just that sometimes the Nets need a skill set that he doesn't have. Like, even when Vaughn talks about adding to the rebounding, he doesn't even mention Dayron's defensive rebound. He said, we want to at least get it back to neutral by utilizing Daron's offensive rebounding. And it's like, that's great, but they need to get a stop sometimes. You know what I mean?
Right. Is there any chance that they decide, hey, maybe Noah Clowney can help out in this big man rotation, or no?
Come on, you're putting me on the spot.
No. So I'll just say, speaking of the theory of players, I love the theory of Noah Clowney, where it's like he took over 4 threes a game last year. That's someone who's going to cover just a shit ton of defensive ground. And I'm more of and it's easy for me to say because I'm just not around the team. Like, I'm of the fuck it, try it mindset. Yes. And the Nets are at a point where, because you haven't doubled down, and I know you're not rebuilding either, but like, fuck it, try it. Would just be where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and like, I get it, but also I get it. They're going to send him to the G League, and he's going to play 30 minutes a night. And ultimately, that's not an indictment on him. He was the second youngest player in the draft. Him and Dariq, I think. At least they were both 3. They were in the 3 youngest players, maybe the 2 youngest of the first round. But in any case, he's just not ready yet. NBA size, kind of NBA schemes, ironing out the three-point ball. Honestly, I think their fucking try it might just be playing him heavy minutes in the G League. Like, they had a really good G League team last year, and they've been to the like conference finals a lot down in Long Island, and that is their version of trying it, just getting him minutes there. And while I am intrigued by him, I don't see him contributing to the big league squad a lot this season, although it would be fun.
Yeah, because it's like, it is a positional need. I understand why you wouldn't if you're trying to be a really good team, but it's not like Dariq Whitehead, you don't need this. And what did you make of that flyer, by the way? Like, that was a very big bet on, okay, like, this is what he did in high school, and like, we're going to swing. And as you mentioned, he's young. What was he, 18 on draft? Is he still 18?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe
So
so.
what did you think of like them taking that swing?
Oh no, I think I was in the building for his 19th birthday. He's 19. I liked it. I liked it, man. Like I'm glad that they took a swing. And you could say Clowney is a swing with how raw he is. But
No, he's a future MVP. That's just a
okay.
guaranteed certainty. Yeah,
Okay.
man.
My bad. That's yeah. Um there are some people that think Dariq Whitehead is like a guaranteed all-star too. People very high on him. I like it. It's like if he, let's say it doesn't work out, and let's say the foot injuries, whatever, and you never quite, get him off the ground. It's not fun to miss on a pick, but it also wouldn't be devastating for where the Nets are at right now, given that they did draft Clowney in the spot next to him in the draft. But I also think because there's not this organizational focus on being a championship team right now, and there's not a tanking focus, it's sort of the perfect situation for Whitehead because the fans aren't going to be like, we have nothing to root for. Like, I need to see Dariq right now. But they're also not going to be like, oh boy, the salary cap space, like what's going to happen? Like we're the Nuggets, like we really need Christian Braun right now to play well. So they can slow play Dariq's development. And I'm kind of really happy he went to a spot where they can do that because I was pretty high on Dariq coming into the draft.
Yeah, I went on a Duke podcast. I think it's called The Devil's Den during the middle of the season, and they were trying to like convey to me like how good Dariq Whitehead is supposed to be. Because I just don't pay enough attention to college basketball. So I'm all for swings, especially when you're just drafting. Like, I mean, I would take swings everywhere if I was running an NBA team. Like, I love what the Wizards did with Bilal Coulibaly. I'm like, good. Like there wasn't the consensus after 4, just do it. But if you're in the 20s, take the swings. You did say something though. I know we've talked about the prevailing theme of they haven't chosen a direction. There's optionality. Are they prepared to react this season to what's happened? Or do you think they should be prepared to react to what's happening this season in season? Or is this more of a team that would play? Like maybe they're better than expected. Do they put some of those picks on the table to get someone to help them? If they're not that good, do they then look at, okay, do we lean a little bit? Do we see what we can get from some of these guys? And like are they going to, or is it more you use the phrase slow play? Like they're just going to play the season out. They'll recalibrate over next summer.
They're not trading Mikal, who was rumored to be offered for 4 picks from an unnamed team, the Memphis Grizzlies, last year.
Yeah. And I mean, like it was like, how fake are those for? Like, I need to know I need like, when they said the Knicks offered 3 for OG Anunoby or whatever, it's like, I bet you it was 2 of the first round picks from Detroit and Washington that might never actually convey. And so like, that's always.
Listen, the one that I really thought was fake was when you heard the 2 for Dorian Finney-Smith. And I love DFS, but I'm like, come on, man. Like one of those had to be protected 1 through 29 or something. But I think they didn't. There was a lot of noise about them trading Dorian and Royce this offseason, and they didn't. I think that says more to me like they're confident that they can deal one of those 2 at the deadline if need be for a first round pick or that their value hasn't appreciated. I would say that's the one. I would say the reaction that they need to make this season, the one that they really can't afford to mess up, they cannot lose Nic Claxton for nothing this offseason.
Masai Ujiri disagrees. Losing players for nothing is good business.
It is good business if you really love winning 36 games. No shade to the Raptors.
No, they're all up. Sorry, then I'll take it. But all the shade to the Raptors. You had one of the worst off seasons recent memory. I am fascinated. This is aside what Nic Claxton ends up getting in free agency because I think a lot of people write off as like, oh, it's just this skinny rim running big who's versatile. Like he'll make like maybe he'll get 15. I'm like, just after watching him offensively, I'm like, and even as a rim protector, like whether it's helping or it's just like it's the standstill guy going up against some physical opponents, like that dude might get paid. I mean, I don't look at the cap space landscape and say, oh, this team is going to give him a crap ton of money, but he's just good enough to where it could actually happen.
And this is not a slight to Cam Johnson, but Cam Johnson's making $22.5 million a year. I think that's the AAV. Nic Claxton, 25 then, right? I mean, this is one of the, at least at worst, I mean, the 10 best defenders in the NBA who has like this legit offensive skill where even if he never develops any of this stuff we're talking about and he can just screen and throw down dunks, he shot 70% from 2 last season. And yeah, the free throws are a worry. Dinwiddie had a quote this year that one of his main goals this season is to get Nic Claxton paid $100 million in free agency. And then he said, Nic Claxton is in a great spot. And I quote, because even if he shits the bed this year, he can still get 75 to $80 million. And
I'm surprised Sean Marks didn't waive Spencer Dinwiddie on the spot for like up in the price tag on Nic Claxton like that.
Yeah, no, that's Spencer right there. But it's true. I mean, like, if you're going to get really analytical, and this ESPN list came out and whatever, and if you concede that Nic Claxton is one of the 5 best rim protectors in the NBA, maybe if not as a drop guy, then like a weak side help guy and a one-on-one
for sure,
guy.
definitely as like the help guy, yeah,
definitely as a help guy, and he can switch out on the perimeter, and he's a really good interior offensive big, even though he struggles with free throw shooting. That kind of sounds like a top. I mean, if you don't want to say 30 most valuable player, 40, 50. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable putting him past 50.
So it gets tough just because when you're not like the offensive hub type, at least they haven't used you that way. But I would say like, if we sat here and said, I think Nic Claxton is going to be a top 50 player by the end of this season, like that is not, I don't think that's a reach. Like that is absolutely something that could happen.
I would feel pretty comfortable in that. I would feel pretty comfortable saying that he was that last season.
Yeah, I mean, he was in the defense conversation. It's just, and I just don't think people realize, and I didn't really think about his player ranking before I came on here. So I'm not saying I'm ahead of the curve, but like, I don't think people understood just how much he improved offense. I think he's still sort of shoehorned into this. He looks like this, like physically, this is what and he doesn't shoot threes. So this is what he is on offense. And it's just like, no, it's like, it's not that. He's not taking the Kristaps Porzingis contested turnaround jumpers yet anyway, but like, there's just so much more there. So I'm going to be fascinated to see his price point and whether there's like, I get it in the instance of Cam Johnson. I call front offices cowards because I think people should throw around their cap space and restricted free agency more. I think it's criminal. No one made the Lakers pay more for Austin Reeves.
That's how the Nets built the last iteration of like, that's exactly how they did. Alan Crabb, and I'm forgetting the rest, but it was Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, Tyler Johnson, Otto Porter. Didn't they end up with all those guys eventually, except for Otto Porter?
Not Otto Porter, but they ended up with Crabb like immediately, and then they ended up with Tyler Johnson after like Katie and Kyrie got here and they needed like a bench guard. But it worked. Like they ended up handicapping some of these teams, and then they were able to trade and make like. I agree with you.
Everyone's worried about, oh, well, our cap space is tied up for 36 hours or whatever it is now. I haven't really dug enough into the new CBA, but it's like, what did you miss out on if you're the Spurs trading for Reggie Bullock so that you could waive him? Like that was a move that would have been there, like whatever. So with Nic Claxton, it's different because he's not a restricted free agent. So like teams might be more inclined to just go hard after. So just going to be fascinated by his price point.
Yeah, that is the one thing I would say. But all the way back to your original question, if they feel like they're going to lose him, and it pains me to say this as somebody who's covering the team and going to games, you got to trade him if you're going to lose him. Like, and we saw with the Raptors. I mean, I'm not saying anything like groundbreaking here, but they cannot afford to do that, and because I think he will command some substantial money.
I wonder I'm trying to think of like what the team would be that like, yo, we'll give you real stuff for contract year, Nicholas Claxton right now. But I'm sure I haven't thought about it enough, but I'm sure it's out there.
Hey, Brook Lopez gets hurt. All of a sudden it's the Bucks, like that February.
You have nothing to trade. Aside, like they could trade a double swap type deal.
Yeah, no. And I don't envision the Nets eager to help them out, but anything could happen. My point.
We are entering the cookie cutter portion of the podcast. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are there any strengths, weaknesses about this team that we haven't discussed or maybe that are flying under the radar that you think deserve more attention?
It's going to be a really funny team. It's going to be a really hilarious team to watch in press conference. I think that's been underrated. Dennis Smith Jr. and Dorian Finney-Smith have this hilarious chemistry from their time in Dallas. Spencer Dinwiddie's funny. Nic Claxton just went on this whole rant about how he's underappreciated on defense. So just because Kyrie and Katie are gone doesn't mean that this is not a team of personalities. But on the basketball court, I think that opponents may be surprised at how physical and hard this team plays. I could honestly see them being the effort merchants that the Knicks have been in the past.
What a great turn of phrase. Effort merchants. A+.
I could see it. They're going to play hard and they're going to play the starters a lot of minutes. And because this team is not going to cry about a play-in berth. This team is not going to cry if they're the 7th seed and they lose in the first round. Like, this is going to be a tough team to play against every night. And because I know every team says that in the preseason, but it feels like if they don't do that, then there is really no point to this team existing.
And also, to bring it back to like the brief trade discussion we had, like Sean Marks has been there, done this before. I do think people say, well, why would they ever sell off talent when they don't have their pick? And it's like Sean Marks has been here, done that. Like, he's not going to be like, they know. And as you're saying, he's not going to be worried about, or the team's not going to be worried about, if we lose in the play-in. They kind of understand like the situation that they're in. And so I say that's a roundabout way of me saying I'm prepared for literally any scenario from this team. I think the only thing that would actually shock me, good or bad scenarios, would be a Mikal Bridges trade. And that's the one thing that I would not, and you could tell me anything else. They finish 4th or 5th in the East. They finish like, I don't know, someone gets injured, they're 13th. They trade Nic Claxton. They go out. I think the best way to frame it would be like with the Mikal Bridges stuff is, are they more likely to make a win now trade or to wind up dealing Mikal Bridges? I actually think it's the former. I think I want to be clear, there's combustible potential here for me. But I think that Mikal Bridges is so good and might be on the best contract in the league that it would shock me more if they wound up moving him than if they decided, hey, no, they didn't go and get Dame, but like, and I'm not saying he needs to be a superstar, but they decide to parlay some of the pick equity that they do have into someone who helps them now.
Yeah, it'd be hard for me to pick. I don't see anything too drastic. I could see either win now. I could see either, maybe tanking or semi-tanking, but I don't think either are going to be too drastic, especially a Mikal trade. I think he's here to stay.
So what does the top 10 rotation look like for this team? I think there are locks, but are there also still questions with do we know who's starting? Like, I haven't seen anything definitive on who their starting lineup will be.
So you were very kind in this outlined it for me, so I don't have to run through it in my head. But the starting 5, I think, is pretty locked to be Ben, Dinwiddie, Mikal, Cam, Claxton. Last year, that was the starting 5 with Dorian Finney-Smith in Ben's place. That to me feels pretty rock solid. Like, they believe in Ben, they're going to start him.
I was more curious about, would they have pause about playing him next to Spencer Dinwiddie and Nic Claxton? Like, would you prefer to be? But then I was looking at the other option. It's like, it'd probably be DFS, and he's not like a caps lock shooter. And so,
he also, I don't love his fit on this team. I just think like Royce is a comparable player. And while he's not as good on defense, he gives you more 3-point shooting and more offensive, like, I'll put the ball on the floor and make the next pass. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly good at that. I know Zach Lowe wrote about it a couple of years ago, but I was still kind of surprised to see it when he came to Brooklyn.
Utah tried, like, before they were like their peak version, like Royce O'Neal would run pick and rolls like that. Like, that was a thing that they were trying to make happen for a while.
Whenever I get in arguments with like my dad or like old head basketball fans or whoever, and they talk about offensive skill, I'm like, just go watch a Nets game. It's like Royce O'Neal's like the 5th best offensive player on the Nets, and he's like in and out cross skip pass. And then I think about it, and I'm like, nah, like I shouldn't do Royce like that. Like, that's a little disrespectful.
So the starting 5 is that, and then
Royce,
like a lock.
Royce, Dorian are going to play. Cam Thomas is going to play.
Okay.
Day'Ron is going to play. Cam and Day'Ron, I think, are more like they will get chances. They're not going to go out there and stink for 82 games because someone will intervene, but they will get chances. So that's 9. And then Dennis Smith Jr. said he had other options to sign, and he chose to come to Brooklyn. I think he thinks he's going to get minutes. And then I know I'm saying 11, but like Dennis, Lonnie, like I don't see them sitting both of those guys, but I also don't see them sitting Cam, really. There might be nights, I think. I think that's the 11. I think there might be nights where Royce hits a few threes and gets a steal, and then Dorian doesn't really play. Or Dennis Smith comes in, misses a 3, turns the ball over, and then it's like, okay, we're just playing Cam or Lonnie. But that's the 11 to me.
This is one of the teams where I think it's a loaded question because they will, in my opinion, play to matchups. But at the end of the season, what do you think will have been their most leaned upon crunch time lineup?
That's a good question. Okay, the Clax, Mikal, Cam Johnson is like locked, I think. Royce. I'm gonna say Royce.
Ooh.
They really trust him.
He's in the
never.
perfect spot too when you look at like when
Mhm.
he was in Utah, people were talking about how he was cooked, and I was like, he's not cooked because he's their only perimeter defender. Like that doesn't mean he's cooked. That means that he's saddled with too much responsibility.
He's not a great perimeter defender. He's also not bad, and he's also more than an ISO guy, which I think he was pegged as in Utah, like because they have to throw him on like LeBron and
Yeah, it was
KD.
like who else? It was just
Yeah,
it wasn't going to be Bojan or Rudy or like Mike
no,
Conley or
no.
Donovan Mitchell doing it.
But like he's a really good team defender, more so than like a one-on-one guy. And I think with this team, that's really valuable, the switching the communication. That might be a hot take, but I think it's gonna be Spencer, Royce, Mikal, Cam, Clax. Just because Royce had his career best shooting year last year and he's launching them in preseason. Like I think if you just look at preseason, I think it's like 10 attempts per 36 minutes, which I know is a ridiculous small size sample stat that I'm already going on a permanent basis by, but he'll shoot, he'll pass, he'll be in the right spots defensively. You know, you can count on him. You know what you're getting. And the reason I leave Ben Simmons out and put Royce in is because I think the spacing and the up tempo stuff, it's just going to be hard in crunch time. It's just going to be hard in the last 5 minutes of a close game. Like you're not going to get out and run. You just can't that often, and the spacing will just be harder. So I hate to do that to Ben, and I do believe he's going to be better, but I think that's just a lineup that it makes sense what's going on. You don't really have to worry about like how do we make this work? Like they can just go out and play.
Is there a weirdo? They probably won't try it, but I want to see them try it lineup. You'd like to see them roll out.
Well, Trendon Watford is already automatically in this five. Like he was born to play in this five. Trendon, Claxton, Mikal. I have two answers to this. One is Dennis Smith, and then I hope Armani Brooks makes the team, which is a super sick answer. Like
Okay.
you may remember him from Rockets and Blazers, but I like Dennis. He needs to be next to shooting. Armani can really shoot. And then Mikal, Cam, Claxton. I don't think we'll ever see it, but that's it. Dennis, Armani Brooks, Mikal, Cam, Claxton. And then the sicko lineup, number two, would be Ben, Watford, Mikal, Cam, and Claxton. And I know I'm using Mikal, Cam, Claxton like in both of those, and that's not really sick or fun or whatever, but I want it to be a little good. So there you go. I got two answers.
That is so much better than my answer, which is it's not weirdo because I think four of these players will spend time to like Nic, like it's their starting lineup is Cam, Nic, Bridges, and Simmons. And then I would just like to see them go ultra huge. I don't care about the offense, but this guy does shoot threes. Let's just throw Noah Clowney out
No
there.
Clowney.
You want to worry about the rebounding? You have Clowney, Ben, Nic Claxton out there. And then you don't need Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges to rebound it. It's fine. I don't think it would be good offensively, but that lineup would be massive. Wouldn't Mikal Bridges at, I guess, 6, what is he, 6'7", 6'6", be the smallest player on the court at that point?
Yeah, no, that would be, they could put Clowney in the corner, and he could just shoot threes. That would be fun. This roster is built for a lot of insane kind of concoctions.
And I always lean towards smaller lineups for the most part, but it's like that's what this team is just going to play. Like I even just put 4 starters in my weirdo lineup. That's
I didn't even put Ben at the 5, which would at least be cool offensively. So I should cook up a Ben at the 5 lineup just in case.
Do you know what the problem is with that? Is it means that Nic Claxton isn't on the floor, which is just an absolute deal breaker for me.
True. So. That's a good point.
So as we record this on, what is it, October 13th, and I mean, it's going live on the 14th, so I don't even need to do that. So as of October 13th, though, their over-unders at 36.5. I believe that's a pullback. When I did the over-unders with my co-host, I think they were at 37 and a half.
Down.
Yeah. Would you take the over or the under on that?
I wouldn't bet it because, well, I said this when it was 37.5. I wouldn't do it just because that is a very tricky, like they're one injury away from me really having to sweat that out. I think I would take the over and not feel great about it. I don't know. I do think that they'll switch more and they'll figure out the drop, and Claxton is really good where they're going to have an above average defense. I think that there will be nights where they just get hot from 3, and the wins will be fairly easy. I think there will be nights where the threes don't go in and then they're not getting ball penetration. And it's like, are they even going to crack 90 points? But yeah, I'll take the over, and I won't like rejoice in how I'm bank robbing the folks at Vegas, though.
And where do you see them stacking up in the East? And I think the best way to kind of frame this is right now, what would be the teams that you would guarantee end up being better than them during the regular season?
So I mean, Bucks, Celtics, Sixers.
Yeah, I guess I'm with you on the Sixers, even if they trade Harden. That's a little too far afield for me to be like.
They trade Harden, they get something back, and Embiid's so good, man, in the regular season. Like, he's so good. So those three, I know I'm gonna forget somebody too. I'll say Miami. I'll say they're closer to 2021 regular season than last year, or 2022 regular season last year.
So I guess you think they're going to care about the regular season? Miami's an interesting one.
I'll say that. I'd say I'd feel comfortable in getting them to 43 wins and that even not being super great. So I'll say Miami, and then, Knicks. The Knicks are going to be better. Speaking of the original effort merchants.
I mean, we are on I would agree with you, but we are on, if Julius Randle continues this every other year track of being good, it's just something to consider.
True. Maybe Jalen Brunson will pick up the slack. And I just think, yeah, I'll go with the Knicks. So we're at 5.
I think you have to include Cleveland in there.
Cleveland, sure. Of course. See, I told you I was going to forget teams. Cleveland's definitely, and Cleveland's above some of those other teams. So then we're already in play-in territory. And then their competition really becomes Raptors, Bulls, Pacers, Magic, Nets. So those are
Hawks. I would throw in there too. Yeah.
Damn. So that's 7 through 12. Those 6 teams. I don't think I can. I'll say Hawks. I just think Trae Young. I like Trae Young. I'm on more
the
than
Quinn Snyder bump too. Yeah.
The Snyder bump. I just think Trae is like, you're guaranteed to get really productive offense in the regular season, and Capella and Okongwu will provide enough defense, and DeJounte will carry the second unit to respectability. So I think that's 7 right there. And then I don't think there's any more guarantees. Everyone loves the Magic. I don't think that's a guarantee. I like the Pacers too. I don't think that's a guarantee. Bulls this could be the year it really goes up in flames. And the Raptors, same thing. So I think 8. They're I guess that sounds a little bit sad to say. Best case scenario is the 8th seed, but
I think I might be a little higher on their best case, because I very much look at, I don't trust Boston in the playoffs right now, but they'll be great in the regular season. Cleveland, Milwaukee, those 3. I think you're right on Philly. And then I'm like, okay, the Miami and the Knicks, it's just I have some pause. So it feels like their ceiling will be 6th. So I might have a little higher ceiling, but I think you hit their floor spot on, because I really do believe the only teams that you can guarantee are going to be worse than them this year, it's going to be the Hornets. I know that if LaMelo stays healthy, they could be exciting. Detroit is just not there yet. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Orlando. I'm very high on their future. And I mentioned this on another podcast, but they had all this cap space. They had 2 lottery picks and just this deficit of players who can shoot, dribble, and pass. All 3 of those things. And they decided to draft a guard/wing who can't shoot. They decided to draft a wing who doesn't really pass. And then they signed Joe Ingles, who is super old. So I think that the Nets are guaranteed to be better than them. After that, it's that's why I think you hit it spot on. Well, they'll be better than Washington.
Yeah, there you go.
11-12 feels like their floor, which is sounds like an insult because it's pretty low, but the East is so after Cleveland, Boston, Milwaukee, honestly, because of the James Harden stuff, because of Miami not trading for Dame and losing 2 guys from their playoff, everything in the East in the middle is so wide open.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I shouldn't say that it's 100% that the Hawks will be better. I just happen to think they'll have a good regular season, but
I think it's a fair bet to make for sure.
I think it's a good bet. I wouldn't say it's guaranteed. So I
think Rudy Gay was the missing piece, and so without him, they're cooked. But
it's a take you could have.
Is there anything else I haven't asked you that you think we need to touch upon before I let you go?
Not particularly. I think if you're a broader, more general NBA fan watching this, if they start to struggle by the trade deadline, I'd be interested in the Claxton stuff. That I think might be the most important piece for the rest of the league, just because they might trade Dorian Royce. Those guys aren't needle movers like Clax. I don't think they're making the big swing this year. Bridges is staying. Cam Johnson is staying. Those guys will be fun to develop. In general, the one thing that's kind of like not irks me, but the one thing I do want to say before I leave is like the narrative is that this is a young team,
Mhm.
like room for improvement, internal stuff. It's not. Like it's not. Like Clowney, Dariq are dragging the average age down. Yes, like even a guy like Claxton, but like, and it's because the oldest guy on the team is Spencer Dinwiddie. He's only 30. The whole team's like 27 to 30, aside from Clax. So, and I guess Simmons at 25, but I'm a little
Simmons
bit
is
lower
only
on that.
25. My God, I forgot
I
how young he
know.
still is.
I know. So that's what I want to say. I'd say I reject a lot of the, kind of discourse that you'll hear about how this is a young team primed for internal improvement, which I understand that they have to sell to the fan base. That's not really where I'm at.
I think people just default to that when there are teams that have actively decided we're not going to decide on where we're going this season.
True.
They're just going to be like, oh, they're young and they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. But hey, let's not end on such a negative note. The defense should be fun and they'll get out and run. I think that's the sell for watching this team. And maybe a rejuvenated Ben. So there
I
are
think
reasons to watch.
I think good, bad, great, horrible, neutral. This team should still be a pretty fun watch, like just based off the personnel they have, and if they are going to ratchet up the pace, as you mentioned. I would say, I don't know, I can't remember where I put them in my league pass rankings. But like this should be a pretty watchable team.
The one worry is like, what if the half court offense is so unbearable? But I do agree in general that this is a watchable team.
Lucas, this was great. Thank you for giving me so much of your time. You're able just to tell our listeners and watchers where they can find you and all the work that you're putting out.
Yeah, of course. Nets Daily is where both of the Nets and Liberty stuff is at. The Liberty stuff I've been really proud of this summer, and if you want to catch up for the finals, I would recommend going to Nets Daily and doing that. Obviously, the Nets were busy as hell over there with the preseason, so that's the site. My Twitter's right here, and then at Swish Theory, I do a bunch of, I guess, random stuff you could call it. If there's a trend or a player in the wider NBA that's intriguing, I have some good stuff there. And if you want to hit me up and say, hey, you should write about this player or this team, that's where I do it on Swish Theory. So
Ooh,
read
you
me
shouldn't have told
there.
me that.
Oh, I know. I'm pretty soon. I'm going to be writing about Poku again. So
Another favorite of mine. I think
I
he's a real NBA player, I think.
I knew that about you. I remember
Oh.
that about you. That's why I mentioned it. So
I'm glad.
yeah,
Well, it'll be a Noah Clowney DM. Maybe I'll be like,
ah,
oh.
that would be on Nets Daily. But in any case, thanks for having me on, and the rest of you, I'd love if you read my work.
Thanks again, Lucas, and rest assured, I'll be spamming your DMs again in the future.